Video 114, the ancient life stream of Lilly Ko, as explained by the ancient spirit tralaka here, flowing here in spirit through the vocal cords of u.f.o. Now, this stream here, as looked at by tralaka and an old spirit friend of his, Gurman, though this here is going to be a bit of a different kind of a video here. For the live stream that is shown has this very interesting flavoring of colorful lives. Very, very different. Now, for Lilly Ko, the arterial system is where she is seen living a very long life as a humanoid that far back. Standing in that life at 6 foot 4 inches tall with long bicolor hair of blondes and white stripes. Her eyes a bit larger than normal, showing some heritage in her history of Draco humanoid back there, someplace of earlier lives of her in the stream, which is not being able to be read at the time. Now, Lilly Ko's eyes in that life was a neon blue. Wow. And her slender form of humanoid body. When she walked, it seemed that she was barely touching the ground, though she was. As she became to the adult age, her focus was to try to get into the schooling to become a pilot, in which she did, enlisting shortly later after her graduation into the local volunteer fighter pilot team. Now, this worked good for her in many, many ways, giving her a stable solar monthly credit earnings while being on a team. This team that flew everything from fast response, small hospital crafts, including spacefighter crafts, which were used at times to aid in settling local disturbances out there in the Badlands, which surrounded large parts of the village her family has had for many generations. Now, other crafts she also aided in flying, such as small cargo ships and cargo tankers. Now, later Lilly would go back to school, but through private manners of teaching, to learn about water management and natural law. This is important to understand here. Here's a beings in the ancient past being taught natural law. So it's taught on other planets besides Earth. This is definitely showing here. And how to be a self-maintaining village and whichever variable species is for and on that village, while blending in with the local nature, keeping it healthy. Here, to explain more, is being parallel with nature in existence, while working to keep the nature aspect of it through the natural law understanding, keeping nature and the surroundings as healthy as the beings within the village next to it. The many variations of the Arcturians, variables of species, love to build extremely, extremely tall buildings. Wow! To keep that city in size, small in acreage, but they use that incredible talent they have of this beautiful architecture types for those buildings. The upper level tubes connecting the upper parts of the buildings from building to building. Then the outer tubes that went around the circumferences of the mid height of the buildings were actually more of a train in the tubes. Then the small cubes which connected just immediate building to immediate buildings and others in a manner. And there is also then a 5th floor level tubing to the other buildings in a likewise manner. Now, under the grounds of those limited in acreage buildings was connected by tunnels with air-suspended trains which rode on compressed air. The above-ground tubes had train cars, or short, small ones, that used an opposing magnetics that curved around an above-center rail, which would then power those train cars also as they came. Now, in the next lifetime, Lilly Ko would be that of an Elfian, standing at 4 foot 8 inches tall. Once again, though, She would be born within the Arcturus planetary systems. On that same planet, her very long and sides braided hair would nearly touch her knees. Her bluish green eyes, so mystical and yet enchanting. Her eyes, though smaller in size, uh, were just so perfectly set in her face. Her ears, though also smaller, they had this really absolute perfect tuning pitch that they could perceive. So in that lifetime, she would spend in the entertainment fields of music and performing in the flowing arts. Now, this pushed her to traveling even to off-world, to local moons to perform of the flowing arts and or music, to also colonies and towns and cities. Her favorite instrument, very unique, at 5 feet tall when resting on its stand, it curved downwards uh, on the upper end and toward the upwards from the bottom end. It's a very interesting look of instrument here. And in the middle was an assortment of different size and color, very lightly pressurized, hundreds and hundreds of buttons. This strange instrument was long in the heritage of her Elfian history. Across her forehead was a special, very special, colored headband that had microprocessors within that would send out in those absolute little micro nanoseconds to transfer the emotions that they're registering, from within her mind to the processor's outer shell colors of that musical instrument, which would make that musical instrument change in colors in so incredibly number of variances. It was really impressive to watch. The sounds that came out from the ends could be so mystical or enchanting, though when she really leaned into the machine harder to push the melodies more profound and uncompromising, or later in soft-hearted filled music from other worlds she would entertain the crowds, as other of the Elfian would be acting in out those art forms in the lower part of that stage. This was not a short presentation. Usually, this concert, as you could call it, usually lasted a full solar day. Wow! In Lily's next life, she would be of Vega planetary systems once again. So she's moving around here in different areas of space. Now she's going into the Vega planetary system here, but this time as a Draco humanoid, which was from her father's side of the family, which had a long and proud history of Draco humanoid. She stood at a very firm 7 foot 6 inches tall, though only 3.5 inch protruding jawline in front of her face, and with that normal double row of teeth, but these were much smaller teeth than a lot of other of her heritage had in past generations, with smaller sized teeth that she had for both the inner and the outer row, with naturally rounded edges. So in a lot of the heritage of the Draco humanoids, the outer was sharper teeth and the inner row was flat. But this was not this situation here. Her naturally abilities to adapt to surrounding worked very well for her. Now her ears stood at 4 inches tall when reaching upwards from the sides of her head. The center hair from the lower forehead across the top of the head down to her mid-back, and a very coarse dark brown this hair. Lily enjoyed this long hair with that putting it into this very coarse hair into spikes in a double row. So to be a row on next to one ear and row next to the other ear that go from the front of her forehead all the way down to her shoulders. In later years, she would also bring colors to those different spikes of her hair, which would actually start a fad in that area of other beings spiking and coloring their hair. A bit of her rebellious personality was definitely portraying here, but she enjoyed this portraying for the customers and even co-workers. Her off-planet schooling in mechanics would later bring her back to her home planet. Much different here, though. Much different. Later, when she came back to the home planet, she was different than what the local neighbors remembered her being as. Now, she worked with crews that reconditioned and repaired city transit bullet magnetic suspended trains that went from city to city. Now, this was at a time that this was a newer idea at that time in the Vega systems. For they have for so long used individual cargo magnetic drive crafts, etc., for delivering to the different cities, towns, and even to and from different planets and moons. The beings of those few cities that had agreed to build those magnetic drive bullet trains that hung under a C-frame, artfully engineered curved towers. So it was in the next life that in the Vegas planetary systems, again, which would be a very big change for Lilly. She stood at only 4'3" tall. Wow, that's short. As a short gray. This would not be a long life as she would have liked it to be. That short grays of some variations are known to be able to live. For Lilly would be that of a spy. A spy working in manufacturing and shipping to ensure materials leaving the industrial centers are actually going to where the proclaimed on electronic documents said they were going. This was all because of this rumored uprising, once again, by a variable of mid-tall grays in those outer parts of the Vega planetary systems. The city officials here, they felt it was better to double check on things in more of a secret manner than risk some opportunist companies from making illegal credits from sales to a known trouble-causing variable of species of mid-tall grays. Now, Lilly from a distance, she looked that of a short gray. It was there that where that stopped, for up close, her skin was nearly that of a different variations of Vega humanoids. Her eyes, though of short gray common black in looks, with 3 fingers in one hand, with in each hand, she had 3 fingers in each hand, with the double jointed thumbs on each one, which were about a third bit longer than a humanoid, and she was able to move these things very, very quickly in her different occupations that she had to portray as a spy. Now, local to the Vega legal system, loyal and local, she was very well. She knew the rules. She had these things memorized. So longing to understand what was her family history that had to do with where she was right at the present time. Well, there came eventually, as most occupations do, a time of conflict. However, this one here was with other grays, though from a different planetary system. And unlike some conflicts, this was a very bloody one. This was a very bloody fight. Lilly had caught an illegal trading for parts, for ship parts that is, the mid-tall grays had been purchasing from a few of the main Vega planets' businesses. Shame on them. And this was the 4th planet of that one particular Vega system, 3rd moon she was on, inside this domed small town, which was still just barely self-sufficient. Most of its dwellers still called it a colony. She got up to the new shipping and receiving ports and the laser fire that was going back and forth, and she ended up into between 3 different groups. There was her group, the two other groups, until that second group realized that Lilly was actually on the same side as they were against the mid-tall grays. This shortened it up to 2 against 1 in group fashions. But this did not shorten the laser fight. Lilly was so isolated to the right area of the shipping ports to run to that second group for aided protection. But it was there. It was there. Lilly was behind these large groupings of boulders, like an island to themselves picture these boulders were. Lilly reached behind her back, from across her back, removing 2 form-fitting, long bags, quickly unfastening the clips on one and opening it up rather. A long-range Griftic Draco Dragon twin laser gun. This mystical symbol still on that long barrel, clipping and a very, very long, a little bit of a curve on it, cartridge into the butt end of that weapon. It clicked right up in there, really nice and firm. That soft form adjustable tripod she placed, nestling it in between 2 of the boulders. She clipped that long gun down onto the decoder pressure-sensitive button she pressed, very in time manners, to properly unlock both the gun and load it at the same time in the right sequence. The weapon was designed for the Draco Dragons long ago, though they were of a much bigger form, and they were more known for their rippling, coarse, flowing muscles underneath their skin. For Lilly, on the other hand, on her short size and form, this here was a little bit different manner as she was behind it. Because for Lilly, this had been a gift. It was a gift from a ship captain years and years earlier, who was amazed at her short height, holding her own in a hand-to-hand combat with criminals much, much bigger than her. He had told her always to keep the enemies at scope distance, where you still had room to maneuver. She squeezed that trigger over and over and over and over again, till she was quite bruised up from the recoil of that big gun. She was hearing all new voices now. This was some time down the road. This was an hour and a half later. By the time now she started hearing others screaming, but this here she recognized was screaming for her to stop. So she set the gun aside as she slowly peeked around the side of one of those boulders. It was one of the still alive second group, waving her arms frantically and screaming, "Damn it! Stop shooting! They're all dead already! The building didn't do nothing wrong! Well, what's left of it? Or are you meaning to redecorate the sides of all the new buildings at the port with holes until your gun runs out of charge?" Lilly started to stand, a little dumbfounded. It didn't seem like a battle had went that long. But she slung that long gun back across her back, but minus the second one and without the case, slowly beginning to walk over, rather unsteadily, to that group, dusting herself off as she slowly walked. It was there she dropped. She lost consciousness, not ever realizing till that point that she had taken 2 glancing laser shots during that battle, one across the mid-left shoulder and one digging in a bit to the left side of her scalp, going diagonally across to the right side of her head. Spending weeks, she did, weeks, in a mainland Vega hospital recovering. Lilly had met this very strange humanoid who really, really got her humor going. And she needed it while she was healing. But this particular humanoid here, he delivered edible flowers. Edible flowers. Who would have thunk that would be? But it came also in many, many flavors, and she just couldn't get enough of this stuff. But this guy here, he was strange, but he was very calm and relaxed, laid back. He delivered to the different hospitals from his actually place where he grew these edible flowers twice a week. She actually went home with him when she was released from the hospital. In Lily's next life, this would be in a whole new system, that being of the Lyra planetary system, as a humanoid, once again, standing at a mid-height of 5 foot 11 inches tall, though much thinner, whitish blonde hair, normally collar length, to soft ocean blue eyes. As Lily became of age, 2 of her friends also joined her in private training for the entertainment field. Her grandfather, who had been in it for hundreds of years, had offered, though, even though he had been very much retired from the teaching aspect of this, at one of the local master level colleges a few hundred kilometers from his home. Lily friends went to studying for the holographic arts, on the other hand. Though for Lily, though she would go into music and management, her goal was to get a job at an outlying space fueling outpost, and these were pretty darn big. This coming from all these stories, which had so much grandeur that her grandfather had told her when she was growing up. Uh-oh. She would learn the hard way, though. You didn't see that coming, huh? That stories can be much more glossier or softer than in real life hard details experience. It was up to her, though, to position her own life in the good manner for her. Her opening night, this is like a year and a half later, her opening night on that stage at one of the particular fueling outposts in space, where one would have carved many pieces of future music from experiences they've had at these different outposts. Here, in this situation, don't be misled by assuming her playing music didn't sound good for the crowd of nearly 1,000 that came to see a brand new performer. For she had this sweet sour blend of music she played, very unique blend. Her voice was strong and commanding, though. Her grandfather, who had just seemed to forget to tell her of a certain very important thing about the first performance as a musician or an actor in the arts. He seemed to forget to tell her it was initiation night. Uh-oh. For a new musician at different space fueling outposts. Usually it was one particular one where all the new ones started, though. 3 hours she played. 3 hours from the start of her music, finding this huge uproar of cheers from the crowd. She couldn't be happier. And then came the management of the outpost and workers. Uh-oh. Putting her in the spacesuit. A spacesuit? What? Which had this built-in hook behind her on her mid-back, which she didn't see at the time. The head manager came over to the microphone, asking the crowd how high they thought that she had performed. How well did they think she performed? Which didn't make sense to Lily, because they were all cheering for her when she finished, until she felt something click on the middle of her back on that spacesuit. She was then lifted very swiftly by means of the tether line being pulled up with the tether line going around through the pulley attached to a long spring at the top center of the ceiling of that arena. Up she went, up, swinging back and forth as the crowd started roaring in laughter. Back and forth she was swinging in that large arena, the seating of that theater, that is. different members of the management started to sell swirly shooting streams of fluid dot guns to members of the crowd. This was what they came here for. This was the big thing for them. And the head manager says, okay, everybody, remember the rules. Everybody, remember the rules. Each time she stops singing in that spacesuit that she's in, you get to shoot at her to swing her around in the airs again with those swirly dots. But no face shot, or you'll get sorted out and thrown out of this station. Everybody was roaring and cheering, and a pop sounded from the mic, and began. It did. Lilly gritted her teeth. How could her grandfather have forgotten? Her precious grandfather had forgotten to tell her something so darnally important. She yelled out as she was swinging back and forth, trying to dodge the shots coming her way. Hey, how long, she screamed, do I have to keep swinging? She screamed into the mic. Many below really laughing loudly at her response. Some yelled back up to her, until every square inch of your spacesuit is covered with layers and layers of little colored dots of spray. Lilly screamed into the mic again, which was in front and inside of her headpiece of her spacesuit. Grandfather! Then remembered the songs and in earnest began to sing. Down below, to one corner of the arena, at one of the saloons, sat her grandfather, watching through a very large tinted glass window. The management chief standing next to him. Both were drinking between laughter, much laughter. The manager chief then responds slowly, I hope her lungs were better than yours were. If I remember correctly, when you first started singing here nearly 390 years ago, you went hoarse in the first half hour. That spacesuit that you were in got so heavy from the deep, deep layers of colored dots of spray, we had to stop midday the next day in fear of snapping that tether line. Grandfather looks, smiling, takes another swig of his drink, and then started a few long, deep belly laughs. Well, that's why a carved picture of me hangs on the top row there in front of the bar for everyone to see who and how they ranked in their first initiation. They both returned to laughter. It was 2 a.m. that next morning before Lilly was lowered to the ground in his spacesuit and helped out of the spacesuit, and a few talent scouts came up to her from amongst the crowd. It was here that was the beginning of a good solid career in performing and of music and the arts, though quite some time before she spoke with grandfather again. Now it was the next life of Lilly that she would find balance from a few different variances of life she's had before. Born on what would be more looking like an asteroid than a planet, the inner parts so much carved out from mining thousands and thousands of years ago in the local system. She would be that of a gray hybrid, 5 foot 6 inches in height. Though very humanoid in looks, her skin tone still had this undertoning of gray though. Eyes more of an egg shape and black coarse hair, but just long enough to reach down below her ears. She had 4 fingers on each hand, like very much like humanoids, with a slighter longer thumb on each hand that had an extra joint that many humanoids don't have. Now, getting moved to planet side as she became an adult, working many, many different jobs until she finally got in this groove she liked with the few other beings in a small town that they owned this co-op farm business that produced many, many different styles of plants and seeds, as well as getting different custom juices from trees and vines and so forth, and selling it to some of this other stuff to a few of the manufacturers in the larger cities to make stuff like heavy-duty adhesives as well as lubricants for different applications. In her 820th year in that life, wow, on that planet, she took over the management of that farm, adjusting the crops to also produce juices for the enrichment juices for drinks, which are usually drank by long route space-going ship crews to keep them sharp in their jobs and fit and alert. This here is the ancient spirit tralaka. As always, my friends, understand you are so much more than that of a humanoid just here on Earth. Each one of you has an ancient streamline or an old streamline and so forth of your own as an individual, all right, with very, very few exceptions. And as you come to understand this, you will understand more of your journey of life. Good night.